Welcome back to Secrets Exposed. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You're the reason these stories worth sharing. Tell us where you're watching from, city or country. We're amazed by how far these tales reach. To get daily new and amazing stories for you, subscribe our channel and press bell icon. All right, let's begin. The courtroom carried a weight that morning, the kind that pressed on shoulders and made every cough sound louder than it should. The air was stiff with perfume, cologne, and nervous sweat. Journalists lined the back benches with notepads ready, and whispers slithered like restless snakes between the wooden pews. At the defense table sat a businessman accused of fraud, his expression smug, his suit sharp, as if he believed the trial was nothing more than a formality. Beside him, his attorney shuffled papers, pretending confidence. At the edge of it all stood Officer Daniel Hale, uniform crisp, shoulders squared, his stance betraying the discipline of years spent in law enforcement. His eyes swept the room the way a watchtower beam sweeps the ocean, slow, deliberate, unyielding. Guarding defendants was routine, but today fell off. He couldn't explain why. The judge entered, robes swaying, commanding silence with a single look. Court is now in session. Judge Rowland intoned, voice cutting through the murmurs. The trial began. Witnesses, objections, testimony. Daniel's focus should have been fixed on the defendant, but in his chest, a low unease hummed like a distant siren. Then his pocket vibrated. Once. Twice. He wasn't supposed to check. Protocol demanded stillness. But his gut twisted in warning. His hand slipped into his jacket, shielding the glow of the screen. One line of text blinked up at him like a knife to the heart. Your son Yar, bleeding. For a moment, Daniel thought he had misread. His pulse pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. He blinked again. No mistake. The words burned on the screen. His son, Ethan, Yar, bleeding. His fingers trembled against the phone. He wanted to rush out, to run until his lungs burned, but his body locked in place, like chains held him to the floor. He forced a breath in through his nose, willing his chest not to rise too quickly, not to betray the storm inside. Then another message buzzed in, this time longer, more devastating. He's asking for you. He whispered. Mom's lawyer held the knife. Daniel's vision blurred. Melissa's lawyer, the man she had introduced months ago with that smile. Too polished, too smooth, too rehearsed. He remembered shaking the man's hand, how cold it felt. He remembered the way Melissa insisted. He's good for me, Daniel. You'll see. Daniel had seen enough that day. Now Ethan was bleeding. Because of him. Daniel's eyes snapped back to the courtroom, but everything felt far away. The defendant's smirk, the shuffle of papers, even the judge's stern face, they all dissolved into static. His knees nearly buckled. He clenched the rail by the witness box, grounding himself. The judge noticed. Officer Hale, Judge Rowland said sharply, halting mid-sentence. Is there a problem? Daniel hesitated, jaw flexing, chest heaving as he fought for composure. The courtroom's eyes turned on him, hungry for drama. He opened his mouth, but his throat was dry. When the words finally came out, they scraped like gravel. My son, his voice faltered. He swallowed hard, then steadied. My son is in the hospital. He's been stabbed. A stunned silence fell. Even the defendant stopped smirking. Pens froze over paper. The judge's face hardened, but his eyes softened with something close to respect. Go, he commanded, slamming the gavel. The crack echoed like thunder. This court is in recess. Daniel's chest heaved as he straightened, trying to mask the hurricane within. His mind replayed the text again and again. Mom's lawyer held a knife. The words were an anchor dragging him into dark waters. He turned toward the double doors at the back of the courtroom, ready to run. But before he could take a single step, two men rose from the benches along the wall. U.S. Marshals. They had been observing quietly, shadows of authority. One of them, a broad man with a weathered face, looked directly at Daniel. His words were low, meant only for him, but they carried a weight heavier than any gavel. We're with you. The second marshal nodded. No hesitation. No questions. Just conviction. Daniel's throat tightened. He didn't thank them. He couldn't. Gratitude was too small a word for the flood inside him. He simply nodded, jaw set, eyes burning with a fire that hadn't been there before. When his hand finally pressed against the cold brass handle of the courtroom door, it wasn't just his son's face he saw in his mind. It was the smug smirk of Melissa's lawyer. The man who thought he could step into his son's life, his family, his place, and now, maybe his blood. The hinges groaned as the doors swung open. The noise echoed through the silent room like the opening of a vault. Daniel stepped forward, the marshals flanking him like sentinels. He didn't whisper. He didn't hide. His voice carried enough steel to rattle the windows. "I'm not walking out alone." And with that, he vanished into the hallway, into a storm only beginning to break. The hospital smelled of antiseptic, sharp and cold, a scent that clung to the air like a warning. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, sterile and unrelenting, as stretchers wheeled past with nurses moving in hurried strides. The echo of intercom calls mixed with the steady rhythm of heart monitors. Daniel pushed through the automatic doors with the marshals at his sides. His boots struck the linoleum floor like gunshots, quick and heavy. He scanned the emergency wing, his eyes hunting for one face. His son, at the reception desk. A young nurse looked up, startled at the sight of 3 men in uniform. Daniel's badge flashed, his voice tight and urgent. "Ethan Hale. 15. Where is he?" The nurse's expression softened into sympathy. She pointed toward trauma room 4. "He's stable for now. Lost a lot of blood. They're trying to stop the internal bleeding." The words sliced through him. Stable for now. Blood. Internal. His throat felt raw, but he forced himself to move. Every step down, that hallway felt heavier than the last, as though the floor itself tried to hold him back. Through the small glass window of trauma room 4, Daniel finally saw him. Ethan, pale against the white sheets, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. His hair stuck to his forehead with sweat, and 4 in his arm, monitors taped to his skin. Daniel's knees nearly gave out. For a moment, he stood frozen, unable to breathe. His son, his boy, the same boy he taught to ride a bike, the same boy who called him after every baseball game, now lay lifeless but breathing, clinging to the edge. A doctor in blue scrubs stepped out, removing gloves. "You his father?" Daniel nodded, words trapped in his chest. "We've stabilized him. The wound was deep, near the ribs. He's lucky." Another inch, the doctor trailed off, shaking his head. "We'll monitor him closely, but he needs rest." Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. "Can I see him?" The doctor nodded. 1 minute. Inside, Ethan's eyes fluttered open as Daniel stepped close. His lips were cracked, his voice weak, barely more than a whisper. "Dad." Daniel gripped his hand, holding on like it was the only thing anchoring him. "I'm here. You're safe now." But Ethan's gaze darted sideways, fear flickering even through the haze of medication. He rasped, "It was him. Mom's lawyer. He smiled when he stabbed me." Daniel's chest constricted. Rage and grief twisted together until he could hardly breathe. He brushed Ethan's hair back gently. "Rest now. I'll handle this." Behind him, the marshals exchanged a glance. One leaned closer and murmured, "That's 2 witnesses now. The boy and the nurse. We've got probable cause." Before Daniel could respond, a voice cut sharply through the corridor. "That's not true. Melissa." She stood at the doorway, her face pale, eyes red as if she'd been crying for hours. Her hands trembled as she clutched her purse. "Daniel, don't believe this. He couldn't have. He was with me last night. At home. There's no way." Daniel turned slowly, his stare icy, his jaw set. Then why does Ethan know his face? Why does he remember him smiling while holding a knife? Melissa shook her head, desperation cracking her voice. "He's confused. He's in shock. People imagine things in trauma." "Enough," Daniel snapped, his voice low but thunderous. "My son is fighting for his life, and all you can do is defend him?" Tears spilled down Melissa's cheeks. "You don't understand. You always hated him. You'd believe anything to tear us apart." Daniel took a step closer, his face inches from hers. "This isn't about us. This isn't about you. This is about Ethan bleeding on that table, because of a man you let into his life. Melissa's lips quivered. Her eyes darted toward the marshals, then back to Daniel. Please, just listen. He didn't do it. The marshals stepped forward, breaking the tension. We'll look into it, one said firmly. If he's innocent, the evidence will show it. If he's guilty, he won't walk away. Daniel looked back through the glass at his son, fragile and broken on the bed. The weight in his chest hardened into steel. Either way, he said quietly, I'll know the truth. The hallway fell silent, the fluorescent lights humming above them. Somewhere down the corridor, a phone rang, sharp and urgent. But Daniel didn't hear it. All he heard was Ethan's whisper replaying in his head. Mom's lawyer smiled when he stabbed me. That smile would haunt him until justice was done. Detective Alvarez adjusted his tie as he led Daniel and the marshals into a cramped observation room at the precinct. The walls were lined with monitors, some black, some flickering, all humming softly. A faint smell of stale coffee clung to the air. Melissa Street has 4 cameras from neighbors, Alvarez explained, clicking his mouse. One of them caught something last night. Time-stamped an hour before your son was brought in. Daniel's arms crossed tightly across his chest. He stood rigid, his jaw clenched, every nerve in his body taut. The marshals flanked him in silence, their eyes sharp, ready to catch anything the detective might miss. On the monitor, grainy footage came to life. Headlights cut across a suburban driveway. A sleek black car rolled into view, the same make and plate as the attorney's. Daniel's stomach dropped. He recognized it instantly. Melissa's boyfriend drove that car everywhere, always flaunting it like a prize. The figure who stepped out was tall, broad-shouldered, his hair slicked back. Even in the blurry footage, the expensive cut of his suit was unmistakable. He moved with confidence, striding toward Melissa's house as if he owned it. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. His son's whisper replayed. Mom's lawyer. He smiled when he stabbed me. There, Daniel said, pointing sharply at the screen. His voice carried a bitter edge. That's him. Detective Alvarez paused the video, zooming in. The face was turned away from the camera, swallowed in shadow. The resolution pixelated until it was almost a blur. Can't make out the features. But the car checks out. One marshal leaned closer, eyes narrowing. He doesn't look in a rush. Almost like he knew he wouldn't be caught. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. He could already picture confronting the man, dragging him into an interrogation room, demanding to know why his son was bleeding in a hospital bed. Melissa sat across the table, arms folded tightly, face pale. She had followed them here, insisting she needed to see. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. It doesn't prove anything. Just because his car was there doesn't mean he... Daniel, please. Don't do this. Daniel snapped his gaze to her. Don't do what? Believe my son? Believe the footage? Believe what's staring you in the face. Melissa shook her head violently, tears spilling. He was with me. I swear. We were together. You're letting your hate for him blind you. Alvarez raised a hand, cutting off their rising voices. Listen, this puts him to the scene, yes. But it's not enough to charge. We'll need more. Daniel exhaled slowly through his nose, a sound closer to a growl. How much more do you need? A confession written in blood. The marshals exchanged glances, calm where Daniel burned with fury. One spoke evenly. He's right. This isn't airtight yet. If we move too early, he'll slip through. Daniel turned back to the monitor, his eyes locked on the frozen frame of the shadowy figure. He studied the stance, the way the man carried himself, the arrogance in each step. Every muscle in Daniel's body screamed for action. But he knew, just as the marshal said, this had to be done clean. No mistakes. Still, inside him, something refused to quiet. His son's weak voice, trembling and sure. He smiled when he stabbed me. The detective hit play again. The figure disappeared into the shadows near Melissa's door. Moments later, the screen went black. Daniel stared at the emptiness. His gut twisted, the unease sharpening into something colder. Something that whispered this wasn't as simple as it looked. And yet, as the silence stretched in that dim room, Daniel knew one thing with certainty. Whether it was the lawyer or not, someone had walked into Melissa's house that night with a knife. and Daniel would not stop until he knew exactly who. The precinct was quiet when night settled in, the kind of silence that felt heavy rather than calm. Rain pattered against the windows, streaking the glass in thin, silver lines. Daniel sat in the dim light of the observation room, arms folded, eyes locked on the paused footage still glowing on the screen. The marshals had gone to make calls. Detective Alvarez was reviewing evidence, but Daniel hadn't moved. His son's faint whisper echoed in his mind like a broken record. "Mom's lawyer smiled when he stabbed me." The door opened with a creak. Alvarez stepped in, carrying a thin folder. His face was serious, the kind of serious that came only when there was something he didn't want to say. "We got a second angle," Alvarez said quietly, setting the folder on the table. He opened it, sliding out still frames printed in black and white. Neighbor across the street had a camera too. It didn't catch everything, but it's clearer than the first one. Daniel leaned forward, knuckles whitening as he grabbed the photos. His heart thudded louder with each image. The car, the figure in the suit, the confident stride. But this time, the man turned slightly toward the camera. For the first time, a partial profile was visible. Sharp jawline, broad forehead, hair slicked back. Daniel's breath caught. It was him. It had to be him. Alvarez's voice cut into his thoughts. "It looks like the attorney, but there's something off." Daniel frowned. "Off? What do you mean off?" Alvarez tapped the photo. "Height. See the doorframe? We measured. This man is taller by at least 2 inches than the attorney we know. Broader too. Gait's different. Less polished, more aggressive." Daniel's stomach sank. He stared at the image again. In his fury, he hadn't noticed the details. But now, forced to see with fresh eyes, Alvarez was right. The frame didn't quite match. The body language wasn't the same. Melissa's voice, trembling and desperate, broke the silence. She had followed them in, ignoring every request to wait outside. I told you it wasn't him." Daniel turned sharply, his jaw tightening. "Then explain this. His car, his suit, my son's memory." Melissa shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I can't explain. I just know he was with me. You hate him so much you won't even listen." Daniel slammed the photo down on the table. "Don't twist this into me, Melissa. My son nearly died. Somebody stabbed him. And all the evidence points to the man you brought into his life." The room went still. The marshals re-entered, their expressions unreadable. One of them picked up the photo, studying it with a soldier's eye. "He's right," the marshal said finally. "The profile doesn't match. But the car being there? That's not coincidence." Alvarez sighed, rubbing his temples. "There's more. We checked traffic cams leading out of the neighborhood. The car left 20 minutes later. Driver's face hidden. But the timestamp matches exactly when Ethan collapsed on the 911 call." Daniel's chest tightened, a knot of fury and confusion. Every piece of evidence was like smoke, visible, suffocating, but impossible to hold. Melissa whispered, "He's innocent." Daniel shot her a look so sharp it made her flinch. If he's innocent, then who the hell walked into that house with his car? Who the hell put a knife in my son's side? No one answered. The rain tapped harder against the windows, a relentless rhythm like a ticking clock. For the first time since it began, Daniel felt something colder than rage slip into his bones. Doubt. And with that doubt came a heavier fear. If it wasn't the attorney, then someone else was hiding in the shadows, close enough to know Melissa's life, close enough to steal his car, close enough to leave Ethan bleeding. Daniel clenched his fists. Whoever it was, they had just made the mistake of crossing a father who had nothing left to lose. The steady beep of monitors filled Trauma Room 4, each sound a reminder of how close Ethan had come to silence. The boy's face was pale, his lips cracked, his chest rising and falling shallowly. Machines breathed alongside him, tubes taped across his arms. Daniel sat at his bedside, his broad frame hunched forward, hands clasped together as if prayer could keep his son tethered. His eyes stayed fixed on Ethan's face, searching for every flicker of movement. The marshals kept their distance, stationed by the door like silent guardians. Melissa stood near the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself, as though she could squeeze away the guilt pressing against her ribs. A nurse entered quietly, adjusting the four, checking the monitors. She leaned down toward Daniel, her voice soft. He asked for you again when he came in. He said. Mom's lawyer held the knife. Daniel's jaw tensed. The words hit like a hammer, even though he'd heard them before. The confirmation wasn't relief. It was gasoline on an already raging fire. Melissa stepped forward quickly. He's confused. You can't take what he says under trauma as fact. Daniel's head snapped toward her, his voice low but deadly sharp. You think a boy bleeding out would invent a story? You think he'd waste his last breath lying? Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. Ethan stirred then, eyelids fluttering. His lips parted, and his faint whisper carried through the sterile room. Dad! Daniel was instantly at his side, gripping his hand. I'm here, son. I'm right here. Ethan's eyes opened halfway, glazed with pain. He was smiling. I tried to run, but he was faster. His voice cracked, every word costing effort. Why would he? Daniel's heart twisted. He stroked Ethan's damp hair back from his forehead. Don't think about that now. You're safe. I promise. Tears pricked his eyes, but he blinked them away. He couldn't let Ethan see him break. Not now. Melissa moved closer, reaching out. Ethan, sweetheart, listen to me. You're confused. But Ethan's face hardened in that fragile way only children can manage when trust is shattered. He turned his head away from her hand, eyes sliding shut again. The rejection cut through Melissa like glass. She recoiled, biting her lip until it bled. Daniel's gaze locked on her. You brought him into our son's life. You defended him when every warning sign screamed otherwise. Now look. He gestured at Ethan's fragile body, the tubes, the machines. Look at what that cost. Melissa's voice broke. I never thought. You didn't think, Daniel said bitterly. The room fell heavy with silence, the only sound the rhythmic pulse of the monitor. A knock on the door interrupted. Detective Alvarez stepped in, folder under his arm. His face carried the kind of news that only deepened storms. We pulled more footage, he said. Traffic cam near the corner caught the car leaving. Same plates, same car. But the driver's face is still turned. We can't confirm identity. Daniel's fists clenched around Ethan's hand. It doesn't matter. He was there. Alvarez's eyes flicked to Melissa, then back to Daniel. It matters if we want a conviction. If we arrest the wrong man, this case collapses. Daniel rose slowly, his height filling the room, his presence sharp as steel. Then we don't arrest. Not yet. We watch. We wait. And when he slips, I'll be there. The marshals exchange a glance, their silence agreeing with him more than words could. Ethan whispered again, so faint Daniel had to lean close to hear. Dad, don't let him get away. Daniel squeezed his son's hand, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. He won't. I swear. Melissa turned toward the window, her reflection staring back at her through the glass. For the first time, a flicker of something darker crossed her face. Fear. Not for Ethan. Not for Daniel. But for the truth that was edging closer, piece by piece. And Daniel saw it. The way her shoulders tensed. The way her eyes darted. He didn't say anything, but deep down he knew. Melissa was hiding more than she wanted anyone to see. The precinct conference room was lit by a single fluorescent strip, its harsh glow bouncing off the polished table. Files were spread out, witness statements, medical reports, surveillance stills. The air was thick with stale coffee and tension. Detective Alvarez stood at the head of the table, flipping through pages with a weary sigh. The marshals sat opposite him, their posture straight but their eyes sharp, tracking every detail. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression carved from stone. Melissa sat near the corner, hands clasped tightly, her knuckles white. Her presence felt out of place, like she was both witness and suspect, both mother and liability. Alvarez finally spoke. We verified Melissa's statement. The attorney claims he was home with her during the time of the attack. Melissa backs that alibi. He looked up, his gaze cutting toward her. But here's the problem. Neighbors didn't see him. Melissa's head snapped up, her voice shaking. That doesn't mean anything. People don't watch our house. Alvarez ignored her. He tapped a photo of the lawyer's car, timestamped from the traffic cam. The car was there. Ethan named him. A nurse confirmed it. But the man Melissa describes doesn't match the figure on video. Taller, broader, more aggressive. Daniel pushed off the wall, his voice low and edged with fury. So which is it? He was home with her, or he was at my son's side with a knife? Melissa's lips trembled. He couldn't have been there. I swear it. One marshal leaned forward, his voice steady. Then explain this. His car left Melissa's street exactly 20 minutes before Ethan collapsed. If he was really with her, who was driving it? The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the lights above. Melissa's hand shook, her eyes darting from Daniel to Alvarez to the marshals. I don't know, she whispered. Maybe someone stole it. Maybe. Stop. Daniel cut in, his voice sharp. You're protecting him. You've been protecting him since the start. And now my son's blood is on your hands too. Melissa's face crumpled, tears spilling over. You don't understand, Daniel. You never wanted me happy. You'll use anything against him. Daniel slammed his palm against the table, the crack echoing through the room. This isn't about you, Melissa. This is about Ethan. His chest heaved, eyes blazing. Our boy is in a hospital bed because of the man you let into his life. Alvarez stepped between them, voice firm. Enough. His eyes flicked toward Melissa, softer now. You say he was with you. Fine. Then we'll verify. Phone records, bank transactions, GPS data. If he's innocent, it'll clear him. Melissa swallowed hard, her gaze dropping to the table. Her silence was louder than any denial. Daniel studied her, his gut tightening. He knew that look. He'd seen it before in suspects trying to hold a crumbling lie together. One of the marshals broke the silence, his voice low. She's scared. Not just for him. For herself too. Melissa's eyes snapped up, wide and wet, as though someone had peeled back the layers she fought to hide. For a fleeting moment, Daniel saw it. A flicker of fear that had nothing to do with losing her boyfriend and everything to do with something darker, buried. Alvarez gathered the files, his tone clipped. We'll know by morning. But if this alibi doesn't hold, the attorney won't just be a suspect. He'll be our target. Daniel's jaw tightened. He turned to Melissa, his voice low but lethal. Pray the evidence clears him. Because if it doesn't, you'll watch me take him down with my own hands. Melissa flinched, her body curling inward as though bracing against a blow that hadn't landed yet. The marshals rose, ready to escort Daniel out. But as he reached the door, Daniel paused. His eyes lingered on Melissa, unblinking. She wasn't just nervous. She wasn't just defensive. She was hiding something. And Daniel knew, when the truth came, it wouldn't just be about her boyfriend. It would cut deeper, straight into the family Melissa had sworn to protect. The interrogation room was cold, deliberately so. A metal table sat between two chairs, its surface scratched and scarred from years of confessions, denials, and lies. A single bulb hung overhead, its light harsh and unflattering. Melissa's boyfriend, Adrian Cole, the smooth-talking attorney, sat with his hands folded neatly on the table. His tailored suit looked out of place in the stark room, but his confidence hadn't dimmed. His smirk flickered every so often, like he believed this was all a misunderstanding that his charm could dissolve. Detective Alvarez leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. The marshals stood against the wall, silent pillars of judgment. Daniel stayed in the corner, his presence like a storm cloud, eyes locked on Adrian with a fury that could melt steel. Adrian broke the silence first. I've already told you. I was with Melissa all night. Dinner at home, then a movie. She can vouch for me. Alvarez's voice was flat. We have traffic cam footage of your car, leaving her street at the exact time Ethan was stabbed. Adrian's smirk widened, as though he had been waiting for that. And yet, I wasn't driving it. Cars can be borrowed, stolen. Unless you have me on video behind the wheel, you have nothing. Daniel's fists tightened at his sides. My son named you, he growled, his voice low, dangerous. Bleeding out on a hospital bed, and the first words out of his mouth were your name. Adrian turned his head slowly, finally meeting Daniel's eyes. His smile vanished, replaced by something colder. With respect, Officer Hale, trauma makes people see things that aren't there. Your son was confused. The words hit Daniel like a slap. He took a step forward, but one of the marshals placed a hand on his shoulder, a silent command to hold back. Alvarez slid a folder across the table. Inside were still frames from the neighbor's camera. "This is you, isn't it?" Adrian glanced at the grainy images and shrugged. "Could be me. Could be someone else. The footage isn't clear." "Then why was your car there?" Alvarez pressed. Adrian leaned forward, his voice calm but calculated. "Because someone wanted it to be there. You're chasing shadows, detective. Meanwhile, you're letting the real culprit walk free." Daniel's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. His mind screamed to lunge across the table, to drag the truth out with his bare hands. But deep down, beneath the rage, something gnawed at him. Adrian wasn't rattled. He wasn't flustered. He was prepared. Melissa, watching through the one-way glass in the adjoining room, covered her mouth with trembling hands. Her eyes darted toward Daniel's reflection, then back to Adrian. The conflict in her face was unbearable. Loyalty warring with doubt, fear clashing with love. Alvarez switched tactics. "If you weren't there, then who was? Who had your car? Who had access to your suit?" For the first time, Adrian hesitated. It was slight, a flicker in his eyes, a pause in his breath, but Daniel caught it. His instincts roared. "You know," Daniel said, stepping forward, his voice like gravel. "You know exactly who was behind that wheel, and you're protecting them." Adrian's lips pressed into a thin line. He leaned back, crossing his arms, his smugness returning. "I don't owe you explanations. When this is over, you'll see how foolish this witch hunt was." Alvarez slammed his hand on the table, making Adrian flinch. "You're playing games with a boy's life, Mr. Cole. That won't end well for you." The room pulsed with tension. Daniel's eyes never left Adrian. For the first time, he wasn't entirely sure if Adrian had held a knife, but he knew, with absolute certainty, that Adrian was holding something back. Something vital. And until Daniel tore out into the open, Ethan would never be safe. The precinct hallway was quiet when the interrogation ended. Adrian Cole was escorted back to holding, still smirking like a man who thought he had the system beat. Daniel paced the corridor like a caged animal, fists clenching and unclenching. Every step echoed off the linoleum, a drumbeat of rage and helplessness. The marshals leaned against the wall, arms folded, their sharp eyes following him but saying nothing. Melissa sat on a bench, her head buried in her hands. When Daniel stopped, his shadow fell over her. She lifted her face, streaked with tears, her mascara smudged, her eyes hollow. "You still believe him," Daniel said, his voice low, more accusation than question. Melissa's lips trembled. I don't know what to believe anymore." Daniel's glare sharpened. "My son almost died, and you're standing here wavering between your boyfriend and your blood." Her voice cracked. "You think it's easy? You think I haven't been tearing myself apart since that night?" She wrapped her arms around herself. "I can't lose him. And if Adrian's guilty," her voice faltered, the rest unspoken. Daniel leaned down, his face inches from hers. "If he's guilty, you already lost him." The heavy silence broke when Detective Alvarez hurried down the hall, a folder in hand. His face carried the tight urgency of a man who had just found something critical. "We pulled something new," Alvarez said, motioning for them to follow. They gathered in the observation room once more. On the monitor, Alvarez played a fresh clip, this time from a city traffic camera 2 blocks from Melissa's house. The attorney's black car came into frame, headlights cutting through the rain. But this time, the angle caught the driver more clearly. The image was grainy, but the man's build was undeniable. Broader shoulders, taller frame. The suit jacket fit awkwardly, almost too tight across the arms. The face was still shadowed, but one detail stood out, the way he walked when he exited the car at a gas station. His stride was heavy, aggressive, almost stomping. Alvarez froze the frame. "That's not Adrian Cole. Look at the build. The posture. It doesn't match." Melissa gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Her eyes darted toward Daniel, desperate for him to see. Daniel's body went rigid. He hated it, but the detective was right. The figure wasn't as polished as Adrian. The confidence was different, less refined, more raw. One marshal leaned forward. Who else had access to the car? Alvarez turned to Melissa. Well, she hesitated, her silence stretching too long. Her hands twisted in her lap. Her voice was barely audible when it finally came. My brother. He borrowed Adrian's car that night. Daniel's head snapped toward her. His voice thundered. What? Melissa flinched under his fury. He said it was for errands. He came by earlier. Adrian gave him the keys. I didn't think. You didn't think? Daniel's voice rose, filling the room like a storm breaking. You let your brother take his car, his clothes, and then my son ends up with a knife in his side? Tears streaked down Melissa's face. I didn't know. I didn't know he was going to. Daniel slammed his fist against the table, the sound rattling the monitor. His chest heaved, fury burning in his eyes. Who else knew he had that car? Who else saw him that night? Melissa's shoulders collapsed inward, her sobs barely controlled. Nobody. He promised me he'd bring it back. I thought nothing of it. Alvarez's voice cut in, steady and cold. Your brother just became our prime suspect. The marshals exchanged a look. Makes sense, one muttered. Same family. Same access. And angry enough to want payback. Daniel turned toward Melissa, his voice low but deadly sharp. You've been protecting the wrong man. All this time, while Ethan lay bleeding, you shielded your boyfriend when the real monster was in your own family. Melissa buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Daniel's chest heaved as he looked at the frozen frame on the monitor. The blurred image of the man who nearly killed his son. It wasn't Adrian. It was someone closer. Someone whose betrayal cut deeper than any blade. And Daniel knew one thing for certain. When the truth came out, the entire family would shatter. The precinct briefing room was dim, lit only by the pale glow of a desk lamp. Rain still lashed against the windows, a relentless drumbeat echoing the storm inside Daniel's chest. He stood with his hands braced on the table, staring down at the grainy still frame of Melissa's brother climbing out of the car. Detective Alvarez shuffled papers, his tone clipped. Name's Victor Hale, Melissa's brother. Record shows 2 prior arrests, bar fights, assault. Nothing that stuck. But here's the kicker. Alvarez slid another folder forward. He's been in and out of debt for years. Lost his share of the family inheritance. Blamed Melissa for siding with your divorce settlement. Daniel's jaw tightened. So this is about money. Alvarez shook his head. Not just money. Resentment. He told friends he got everything. House. Child. Stability. Meanwhile, he was left with nothing. He's been stewing in it for years. Melissa sat in the corner, her face pale, hands clasped as if in prayer. I didn't know, she whispered. He never told me. Daniel turned on her, his eyes blazing. Of course he didn't. He saved it for the night. He came into your house with a knife. Her lip quivered, but she didn't answer. One of the marshals leaned forward, his voice steady. This explains the build, the stride, the aggression. It was him. But Daniel didn't look relieved. His rage deepened, the storm inside growing darker. His son hadn't been attacked by a stranger, not even by Melissa's boyfriend, but by family. By someone who should have protected him. The image of Ethan on that hospital bed burned in his mind. The weak whisper, the fear, the betrayal. Where is he now? Daniel demanded. Alvarez exhaled. That's the problem. He's gone. Packed a bag from his apartment this morning, left his phone behind. He's off the grid. Daniel's fists clenched. So he knows we're coming. Melissa finally spoke, her voice raw. He wouldn't hurt Ethan. He wouldn't. Daniel's hand slammed against the table, silencing her. He already did. His voice thundered, rattling the walls. He put our son in a hospital bed, and you still sit here defending him. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. He's my brother. Daniel's voice dropped, low and venomous. And he tried to kill your son. The marshals stepped in, pulling the tension back under control. Alvarez spread more files across the table. We traced a gas station purchase, 10 miles from Melissa's neighborhood, right after the stabbing. He bought fuel cash. Surveillance caught him briefly. Same suit jacket. Same car. On the monitor, the footage flickered. Victor Hale at the pump, his shoulders hunched, his movements quick, frantic. And then, a chilling detail. He tossed something into a dumpster behind the station. Alvarez froze the frame. We're sending a team to recover it. Could be the weapon. Daniel's heart pounded. His son's blood could still be on that knife. Proof. Justice. But beneath the rising hope, unease twisted in his gut. Something didn't fit. If Victor had stabbed Ethan, why wasn't he running faster? Why linger? Why use Adrian's car? Adrian's suit? Unless. His thoughts were cut off by the intercom buzzing. A young officer's voice crackled through. Detective, hospital just called. Officer Hale's son woke again. He's asking for his father. Daniel's chest tightened. Without another word, he strode for the door, the marshals following. Melissa rose from her chair, trembling. Daniel, please. He stopped, turned just enough to glare at her. His voice was steel. If you're hiding anything at all, when I come back, you'll regret it. Melissa's tears spilled, her shoulders shaking. Daniel pushed through the doors, each step heavy with fury and dread. His son had answers, and he would hear them. Because deep down, Daniel knew Victor wasn't the only one keeping secrets. The hospital room was dim, lit only by the steady green glow of the heart monitor. The rhythmic beeping filled the silence, every sound a reminder that Ethan was still clinging on. Rain tapped softly against the window, echoing the storm Daniel carried inside him. Daniel stepped in slowly, the marshals waiting just outside. His boots clicked softly against the tile, but to him, it sounded deafening. At the bedside, Ethan stirred, eyelids fluttering open. His face was pale, but his eyes, though tired, held something sharper now. Fear mixed with memory. Dad. His voice was a rasp, barely audible. Daniel leaned closer, gripping his hand. I'm here, son. You're safe. But I need you to tell me what you remember. Ethan swallowed, wincing as his chest rose shallowly. His lips trembled before words escaped. It wasn't quick. He followed me. In the hallway. He wore Uncle Victor's cologne, but his brow furrowed, the effort making his whole body shake. It didn't smell like just him. It smelled like Adrian too. His aftershave. Both. Daniel froze. His grip tightened around Ethan's hand. Both? Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He laughed, Dad, when he pushed me. Not like Uncle. It was smooth, confident, like Adrian. His chest hitched, but when I fell I saw the eyes. Uncle's. Angry. Wild. Daniel's chest constricted, rage and confusion colliding like two storms. Two men. Two scents. Two faces blurred together in trauma. The marshals stepped in, drawn by the sound. One asked softly, what's he saying? Daniel turned, his voice gravel. He smelled both. Saw both. Ethan clutched his father's hand, desperation flooding his weak voice. Dad, they were together. I know it. Uncle and Adrian. He stabbed me, and Adrian helped. Daniel's blood ran cold. He stared at his son, the pieces crashing together. Adrian hadn't been just covering for Victor. He had been there. Melissa appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her body trembling. She had heard every word. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, that can't be true. Ethan's gaze slid toward her, tears brimming. Mom. He didn't even call for help. He just stood there, watching. Melissa staggered back, her hand clutching the frame for balance. Her lips trembled, but no words came. Daniel rose slowly, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the room. His eyes burned with fury as he looked at her. You've been defending both of them, your boyfriend and your brother. And together, they nearly killed our son. Melissa shook her head violently, tears spilling. I didn't know. Adrian told me he was cleaning up a mess Victor made. He said it was just a fight that got out of hand. I didn't know Ethan saw them both. Daniel's voice dropped, low and venomous. You didn't ask, because you didn't want to know. The marshals exchanged grim looks, their voices steady. If Ethan's right, we're dealing with conspiracy, not just an assault. An attempted murder covered up by both. Daniel leaned close to his son again, softer now. You've done enough, Ethan. Rest. I promise you, they won't get away with this. Ethan's eyelids fluttered closed, exhaustion pulling him under again. The monitor's steady beeping filled the silence. Daniel straightened, his body taut with rage and purpose. He turned toward the marshals, his voice steel. "We bring them both in. Tonight." Melissa sobbed, collapsing into a chair. "Daniel, please don't destroy my family." Daniel stopped at the doorway, his voice sharp as a blade. "They destroyed it themselves." And with that, he stepped into the hall, the marshals at his side. The hunt wasn't for one man anymore. It was for two. Night cloaked the city in wet shadows. Rain slicked across the streets, neon lights reflecting in broken puddles. The marshal's unmarked SUV rolled slowly down a quiet block, headlights cutting through the mist. Inside, silence pressed heavy, broken only by the static hiss of the police radio. Daniel sat in the back seat, bulletproof vest strapped tight across his chest, his eyes burning with the kind of fury that had no outlet yet. His fists clenched and unclenched against his knees. Across from him, one marshal adjusted his earpiece while the other checked the sidearm resting on his hip. Detective Alvarez's voice came through the radio. "Unit 3, suspect Adrian Cole confirmed at his apartment. Victor Hale's vehicle spotted 2 blocks east. They're together. Proceed with caution." Daniel's jaw tightened. Together. Just as Ethan said. The SUV braked silently in front of a modest apartment building. Lights glowed faintly behind curtains on the 3rd floor. One of the marshals turned to Daniel. "We go in quiet. If they resist, they won't get the chance." Daniel cut in, his voice low, steel in every word. The team slipped from the vehicle, boots splashing in shallow puddles. Rain pattered softly on their hoods as they moved up the stairwell, each step deliberate, silent, the weight of justice following close behind. Outside the apartment door, Alvarez was waiting with 2 officers. He nodded grimly, holding up a warrant. The faint hum of voices drifted from inside, muffled, tense. Alvarez mouthed, "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. The door splintered under the ram, exploding inward. Shouts filled the air. "Federal marshals. Hands where we can see them." Inside, the small living room froze into chaos. Adrian Cole sat at a table, a glass of whiskey half raised. Across from him, Victor Hale jolted upright, his broad shoulders tense, eyes wild. For a heartbeat, all 4 men stared at one another, the storm outside echoing the one in the room. Adrian's smirk faltered for the first time. "This is a mistake," he started, his smooth voice cracking under pressure. Victor's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw twitching. His eyes darted toward the window, calculating escape, but the marshals blocked every angle. Daniel stepped forward, his presence filling the room like thunder. His eyes locked first on Adrian. "You stood there while my son bled." Then he turned to Victor, his voice a growl. "And you put the knife in him." Victor's lips peeled back into a snarl. "That kid wasn't supposed to be there. Melissa was." The words hit like a detonation. "Melissa!" Adrian hissed. "Shut up." He lunged forward, but a marshal shoved him back into his chair. Daniel's vision blurred with rage. "You came after her, and my son took the blade instead." Victor laughed bitterly, eyes blazing. "She ruined me. Chose you over family, sided against me. She deserved it." His chest heaved, spit flying as he shouted. And he got in the way. Adrian slammed his fist on the table, his polished mask crumbling. "You idiot, you weren't supposed to say that." The marshals moved fast, pinning Victor against the wall, snapping cuffs around his wrists. Adrian tried to twist free, but Alvarez shoved him down, binding his hands behind his back. Daniel stood in the center of the storm, chest heaving, eyes burning as he stared at the 2 men who had nearly destroyed his family. "You both thought you could bury this," he said, his voice quiet but deadly. "But my son lived, and now every word you just spat is going on record." Victor struggled against the cuffs, rage burning in his eyes. Adrian sagged back in his chair, his smirk gone, replaced by a hollow stare. The marshals dragged them toward the door, their protests echoing down the hallway. Daniel followed behind, his boots steady, his heart pounding with grim satisfaction. For the first time since the night began, he felt the scales of justice tilt back into balance. But as he stepped into the rain-slick street, Daniel knew the storm wasn't over. The truth had been dragged into the light, but the aftershock would cut deeper than anything yet. Because Melissa would have to face what her brother and her lover had done. And Daniel would have to face what it meant for Ethan to grow up with that truth. The rain had eased by dawn, leaving the city washed but heavy with silence. The storm outside had broken, but inside Daniel Hale, the storm still raged. He stood in the hospital corridor, still in his vest, his boots damp from the night. The marshals had gone to process Victor and Adrian. Alvarez was buried in paperwork. But Daniel remained here where it mattered most. Through the glass panel of trauma room 4, Ethan slept peacefully at last. The bandages were fresh, the machine steady. The boy's chest rose and fell in a rhythm Daniel clung to, proof that his son was still alive. Melissa sat by the bed, her face drawn, her body wilted like a flower left in the rain. She had been crying all night. Her hands shook as she stroked Ethan's hair, her eyes swollen and red. Daniel stepped in quietly, the door clicking shut behind him. She didn't look up at first, only whispered to the boy though he was deep in sleep. "I'm so sorry, baby. I should have protected you. I should have seen." Daniel's voice was rough, heavy. "Sorry won't undo what they did." Melissa flinched, glancing at him with hollow eyes. "I didn't know. I swear to you, Daniel. I didn't know they would." Her voice broke, the rest dissolving into sobs. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe she hadn't chosen blindness over protection. But the image of Ethan turning his face away from her hand the night before still burned in his memory. "He's alive," Daniel said, forcing calm into his voice. "That's what matters now." Melissa shook her head, her tears spilling. "He'll never forgive me. How can he? His uncle, my own brother, and Adrian." Her body shook with grief. "The two men I trusted most after you, and they nearly killed him." Daniel stared at her, his voice low, steel beneath sorrow. "You didn't just trust them. You defended them, even when the truth was bleeding in front of you." Her lips quivered. She bowed her head, unable to deny it. Ethan stirred then, his eyes opening slowly. He blinked, weak but aware. His gaze landed on his father first. Relief softened his pale features. "Dad," Daniel moved closer, gripping his hand gently. "I'm here, son. It's over. They're not going to hurt you again." Ethan's eyes welled. "They really took them?" Daniel nodded firmly. "Both of them." Victor confessed. "Adrian tried to cover it up. They'll never touch you again." Melissa leaned closer, her voice breaking. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I didn't see what they were capable of. Can you forgive me?" Ethan turned his head slightly, his face twisting with hurt. He didn't answer. The silence was louder than any words. Melissa broke, sobs shaking her frame as she buried her face in her hands. Daniel's chest tightened, but he stayed steady for his son. He squeezed Ethan's hand. "You don't need to forgive now. You just need to heal. I'll take care of the rest." The room fell into silence again, broken only by the soft beep of the monitor. Later, when the marshals returned with paperwork for Daniel to sign, one of them clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You did good. You didn't walk out of that courtroom alone, and you didn't face this night alone either." Daniel nodded, his eyes never leaving his son. "I'll never walk away from him. Not again. Not ever." As the morning light spilled through the blinds, Ethan drifted back to sleep, safe at last. Melissa sat broken beside the bed, her tears soaking into her palms. Daniel remained standing, the unshakable sentinel, a father forged harder by the fire of betrayal. He knew the scars would linger, on Ethan's body, on Melissa's soul, on their fractured family. But he also knew this. They had survived, and survival was the first step to healing. Justice had been served, but the cost of truth would echo in their lives forever.